Hi, you're listening to the Authorised podcast. I'm Harry Reardon. Thank you so much for listening. You can find me on Twitter at Mr. King Reardon, on Twitch at Carlos Spartacus, don't laugh, and all the rest of the links are down below. You can also support us on Patreon. I really anything helps. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, ready? 3, 2, 1. You're listening to the Authorised podcast. I'm Harry Reardon. Thank you so much for H.C. Newell. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is H.C. Newell. I am the author of the soon-to-be published book series, the Fallen Light series. The first book will be called Curse of the Fallen. It is an epic fantasy series. I've worked for about 7 years now. Oh, well, it's a series, so there's going to be 6 books in the series, and then I have 3 planned novellas, which are going to follow. One's going to be a prequel, and then the other are going to follow other characters as they go in and out of the main story.
That's amazing. What got you into the epic fantasy thing?
Honestly, it was my husband. So before I ever met him, I always enjoyed writing, and I enjoyed writing screenplays or just little stories. I had, before laptops, I had a that I would just put all my stories in, and everybody in school loved them. Well, my friends anyway. But whenever I met him, I sort of fell out of it, first love sort of thing. So I picked it back up about 4 years later, and he was really into fantasy stuff, and he got me into it. So I was in this writer's block for years, not knowing what to write about. And he came up with a suggestion of doing some sort of fantasy thing. I can't even remember what he said at first, but it just sort of clicked in my head, and I started it. And I wrote this really cringy young adult novel. Mine was just so cringy. It was so bad. But that was my first version of the story, and I've rewritten it 5 times until what it is now.
That's amazing. What sort of fantasy is it? What sort of fantasy was he into? What?
I mean, he's really a huge gamer. So really, he really loves like Final Fantasy games and Skyrim, Lord of the Rings, things like that. Just actual good traditional fantasy type stuff, and it really works. I guess, let me see what I'm trying to say. He was really the inspiration for my writing style, I guess, because when people read my story, they say it feels more like traditional fantasy, not the new one where there's plot twist after plot twist after plot twist. It's really quest driven, and it's really plot driven, but it's huge. There's a lot of mystery. Things that happen in the first book don't even come out, or you don't come back to the places until book 5, things like that. So everything's really woven together nicely.
I think that's amazing. I had an idea for a fantasy. I had an idea for, because I love that, like Skyrim. I still do. I put so many hours into that game, and I love the idea of being able to build my own world and do my own thing. But it's a task, especially what you've done. How big is each book?
Well, I've only written up to book 3, and they're just first drafts. So the finalized book 1 is about 85,000 words, so it's actually pretty small for an epic fantasy. But they're all around that same range, around 85 to 90,000 words. I think book 1 has 34 chapters in it, and then it's going to have chapter 1 of book 2 at the end for everyone to kind of get invested in that story before it publishes.
Absolutely. And are you going self-published or traditional?
I looked into both, and I am going self-published for myself. There's just a lot of pros and cons to both of them, and I just felt, for me, and the creative freedom and the perfectionism that I have for my work being the way I want it, self-published is definitely the way I want it.
Oh, absolutely. And today we've got, you got access on the computer now to do all of the work yourself, in a sense where, for me, the biggest thing was I couldn't have somebody come in and say, you need to take this out, or you need to edit this, or I don't like this. That, like, we were talking beforehand about, like, things that irritate you, and nitpicking, like that. Just the thought of it was like, oh, that's going to be an issue. So I did the same thing with the self-publishing route, because it's just easier, isn't it? You have that control.
It's easier, but it's harder. There's a lot, like I said, there's a lot of pros and cons to both. The only thing that comes with self-publishing is the stigma that anyone can self-publish, so you're not a real published author. And I've actually come into that a lot whenever I try to collaborate with other self-published authors, because you do get this sense of, I can do it myself, it's easy. They take the easy route. A lot of people tend to take the easy route, and the people that really go for it and they spend the money and they spend the time and they do all the work and they research marketing and they really try, they're kind of overlooked a lot of the time because of the people who go the easy way. Not that there's anything wrong with going the easy way, but it can definitely show in your writing when you've really taken the time to invest yourself and invest your money and invest your time into making this as good as you possibly can.
I love it though in the same sense, because yeah, there is a stigma, but and pros and cons. The biggest one was advertising. No, I had no idea the monumental task that advertising would be. Like once you think that you've got it published now, you're like, yes, it's great. You have a celebration, and then it's like, okay, now I've got to do this, and that is terrifying. How are you going about the advertising route?
I really started researching a lot of marketing. It's really difficult. I was a photographer for a few years. It is one of the worst things. I am not good at it. I don't understand it. Social media and me just do not get along. I'm 27, but I'm too old for social media. I just don't understand it. So it's really trying to, I've taken free online classes. I've looked up a bunch of stuff online on YouTube and things like that. So for me, what I'm going to try to do, of course, is targeted ads. I'm also going to reach out to podcasters and reviewers and people that can really help to get my name out there. I'm really looking to get honest feedback, not pay someone for a review, but send them my book. I want to know what they think so they can let others know. Because if it's honest, people are going to resonate with that. They're going to be able to tell, and they'll be more likely to purchase it if it's a good review from someone.
Certainly, I reached out to a YouTuber who does book reviews, and he's got like 15 followers, I think, like very very small, but he is consistent with his work, and I've followed him for ages, and I listened to the. It doesn't get a lot of views, but I reached out to a few other people, and I never heard anything back. But I love the idea of that, like being able to sort of speak to other people, having good people around you as well that are honest. Like I don't know about how your writing style is, but when I write a chapter, I probably rewrite it 50 times. And my fiance, my partner, she's super patient. Like every time I rewrote it, I was like, "Do you mind reading it again?" And she was so good. In never once did she go, "Oh." She just like straight on it, and I think having that around you is a massive help.
Oh yeah, definitely. So these books, I told my husband when I started that they were written for him. So I don't want him to actually read them until they're finished. So it's been really hard because I did all of this basically by myself. My cousin, she also writes just kind of for fun. So we even took creative writing classes in high school together and stuff. So she would read my chapters and she helped me, but the final book, she hasn't helped me in a while because she's got her own family things to do, which is fine for me to have to do this by myself. And it's very difficult. So if there are any authors out there who are listening, find a writing partner. I have found one on a Facebook group. Actually, I made a Facebook group for my book, and I advertised it. And this fantasy reader, he's very, very big into fantasy books. He messaged me and he was like, "Hey, can I read your first chapter?" So I let him, and he has helped me appreciate so much about my books. He's a reader that I don't know, that doesn't know the story, who's giving me honest feedback like, "Whoa, why did you say this?" or "This is cringy," or "This doesn't work here." So, and he's not charging me anything, and I don't know why, because he's amazing. But I mean, really, and my biggest thing for authors, if anyone's listening that is an author or wants to be, is to get a writing partner, not someone that will write it for you, but someone that you can bounce ideas off with, someone that will read and help you, streamline your plot, find plot holes, someone that's really as invested in the story as you are. And they're hard to come by, but when you find that person, and I just saw this guy by chance. I don't even know how we met. I don't know how he found me really. And I wasn't even going to respond back to him because I was like, I don't know this guy. But I took a chance, and he's like one of my best friends now. It's been life changing. So props to him. His name is Keith, and he has really helped me to make this story so great. He's actually the one that told me about this podcast.
I was about to ask. Thank you, Keith. It's a great idea. I spoke to my partner recently because I say recently, it was about 2 years ago. I have a tendency to do that. I wanted to start a writers collective where I'd say like a handful of people max, like 4 or 5, depends on your hand, and where everyone could bounce ideas off each other and we could sort of help each other. And because I've got a million and one ideas, and my partner had to just tell me to stop. She's like, you just focus on the one that you're doing and come back to the rest. So I have a notepad with me all the time. And I was like, if I can get some form of collective, not so that they can write it for me, but so that we could bounce off ideas off each other and you have that feedback and you've got that working group, I think that's fantastic. If you've got that with someone, I think that's phenomenal. I do have to ask, what's with the name, the shortened down name?
I'm a very private person. I don't want anyone to be looking me up on social media. I actually even have my personal social media taken off of search engines so that no one can. I don't know why. I don't have anything crazy on there. I just don't really like the idea of people looking me up that I don't know. In my personal life, at least. So I have a pen name. Also, I know that there's a stigma on women writing fantasy. A lot of people don't purchase fantasy novels, like epic fantasy. You know, young adult is more for what women write. That's where the women have the majority. But in fantasy, they don't really. So I didn't really want to off put any readers because I am a woman. So I just figured it would be best to just kind of shorten it, hyphenate it a little bit, just for really my own, personal safety, I guess. I don't know. I watch too much true crime to put my name out there.
Oh no, I fully get it. I'm obsessed with true crime. I blitzed Mindhunter, and then I went found the books, and like now my YouTube is mostly it's films and TV
Oh
or
my
true
gosh.
crime, and I just it's one of those. The problem is it's a rabbit hole. And once you're in
Yes.
it, like I can't get out. Like, and then I'll talk to family or friends, and I'm like, oh, that reminds me of a true crime that I listened to, and they're
Yeah.
like, what is wrong with you?
Or my sister got me into Bailey Theory, and she's on YouTube. She does makeup and tells true crime, and I'm like, girl, why is your real name on your channel? Get that off. Like, no.
Yeah, it's like Bella Fiore. There's so many of these amazing people. That chapter, there's so many of these amazing people that do multiple things. Like, but it's like the makeup tutorial. And then it's just, oh, here's a few people that were butchered. Enjoy that. I love it. I think it's fantastic. Another a great one who is writing epic fantasy who I had on before was Tahani Nelson. I don't suppose, have you
I
ever
have
spoken to her?
not.
Oh, she's fantastic. She wears this battle armor, and I just think it's amazing. She's just like, yeah, I don't care. I do what I want.
Oh yeah,
I
that's
love
awesome.
that kind of thing. So what is your writing process? What keeps
Well,
you going?
for one, the biggest thing is that I don't have children, so I have a lot of time. I am married, but I have a lot of time to write, and I work from home, so I can also kind of write while I'm working. So I honestly typically write probably 6 to 8 hours every single day, and yeah, sometimes it
Oh wow.
is all at once or it's straggled throughout the day. But I have tried, and everyone has their own process. Everyone has different things that work. I have bought templates from Etsy, which are really great. I've looked up templates or different writing styles. I guess like outlining chapters before you write them and things like that. A lot of those didn't really work for me. It kind of had me overthinking the details. I've been working on the story for a long time, and it's 6 books long. It's an entire fantasy world it's got a whole magic system. It has a whole, I can't even think of the word again. Not a kingdom. It's
No,
ran
I
by
understand.
a religious. So it has a whole religion. It's got 7 or 8, I think, different races, and they all have their own culture and they all have their own backstories. And so that's kind of what I did. I myself,
No,
my
you're right.
process when I was writing, what I felt worked best for me was to write short stories for every main character, for every race, for every major town, for the world. I wrote backstories and made them into short stories for everyone, because filling out a questionnaire with what's their favorite color, what's their occupation, that didn't really work for me. So I just went and I just wrote an entire short story. It was about 4 or 5 pages each for every antagonist, every character, all that. And then I sort of weave them all together.
It's very J.R. Tolkien, isn't it? I was reading about him recently. He gave every race has got a backstory. Every race has got their own religion, their own, and I love that level of detail. I think that's fantastic because it gives life to a character.
Oh
I
yeah,
think
definitely. And
that's
that was my play. I as I said, I've written the first book, I think 5 or 6 times. Full, printed it out, done, full manuscript, printed and done, completion of the first book 5 to 6 times, and every time it was different because I never felt right about it. And it's because to me the story didn't have depth. It wasn't 3 dimensional. It was very 2 dimensional. So I wanted to give that level of depth. Just even with little things that people don't notice. Right now, I'm working on the prequel to book one, and in the prequel, you come to places that you see in book one, right? And it's 10 years in the past, though. So the prequel is 10 years before the first book. And in the prequel, there are places that aren't as built up as they are in book one. So there's only like 2 buildings there, when in book one, there was like 5 or 6 buildings. So it's just little things like that that are real life situations that the reader won't actually notice or take mental note of, if that makes sense.
No, I think it's fantastic. I mean, I love things like that where you've got the opportunity because it's your story. I was a I was a boxer at one point, not a good one. I was more of a punching bag. I was really good at taking a beating, and we had to do these interviews. And yeah, there's 2 types. You got one in front of the camera, and they're like, "What are you gonna do?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm gonna box." And it's awful because the other guy, I had like stare downs, and they're looking at you, and they're like really in your eyes, and I just remember being there thinking, I don't know what's going on. They're like they're so psyched up, and they're all ripped, and they're full of abs and stuff. And I remember I was having a stare down and that, and the cameras were there, and all I could think in my head was like, wonder what I'm gonna do after. Might go get some get some food or something. And I remember looking at the guy, and he's got these evil eyes, and I just I can't remember where I was going with that. Oh yeah, when I look back on them, I can see how disconnected I am because like I try to avoid the majority of them. There's a photo that lives on the dark side of the internet of me between the 2 models you had to take a picture with, and I'm chubby and pale in the middle, and these 2 tanned, beautiful women are stood next to me. And I remember apologising because I'm like, you shouldn't have to do this. But yeah, like so, yeah. The stuff that I do once it's out, I just that's the terrifying thing about books. I find is once it's out, well, as like a podcast, I can just leave it. But once you've got a book out, and you see the reviews, it's a
Right.
completely different thing. Like, are you prepared for that
Um,
sort of that? Because some of them are. I don't wrong. Like reviews are review, and it's subjective, so you can kind of go, you take it at what it is, and you use it as an opportunity to learn from it. But some people are
yeah, I'm
mean.
prepared for that. I mean, it comes with the territory. I'm confident enough in my book to know that it is a good, grounded book. I'm not going to sit here and say it's the best book in the world, but I myself feel confident enough. Right. I
No,
mean, but that's the reason I didn't publish the other books that I wrote. I kept rewriting them because I was like, it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right. This one feels right to me. This one, I don't think that there are very many flaws that I have found. A lot of my readers that are into fantasy really love it. It's been getting really good reviews from them, but there are also people, beta readers, for example, who read your book before it's published and kind of give you their opinion to help you really reconstruct it a little, um, before the finalized production. Some of them have been really confused. Um, my book is not very straightforward. It's very, you have to pay attention to read it. There's a lot of mystery. There are a lot of connected things. And some people, they can't really follow it very well. And you can tell when people read fantasy or not, because the people that don't follow it very well, every time I ask them, they always say no, they don't read fantasy. So I'm sure I'm going to get people like that who are like, this book is confusing. It doesn't make any sense. The characters are doing this, and I don't know why. And that's fine. This book is not for everyone, and it's definitely meant for fantasy readers. But I'm wholeheartedly expecting some reviews like that. Or there's a very negative connotation when it comes to the religion that oversees the world. So I'm sure I'm going to get some feedback on that as well, because people like to pull their own morals and their own beliefs into a work of fiction, and then they like to tie that work of fiction to what the author actually believes. So I'm looking not looking forward. I'm you know what I'm trying to say. I'm expecting that type of feedback
Yeah,
from people. And, it just comes with it when you put yourself out there and you give it your all and you try as hard as you can. There are just mean people out there who are just going to either be jealous or they're just there to be a keyboard warrior and to nitpick every little thing, or they just genuinely don't like it and they think that I need to work on it, and that's fine. So it really comes with it. You have to just mentally be prepared for it. I know that, at least from a writer's standpoint and going through and talking to other authors who have also self-published, is that bad reviews actually look better for you, if you don't have too many of them, because it makes the comment section look more real. If you have 100 reviews and every one of them are 5 stars, people are going to be like, "Wait a second, like this book isn't that good," you know.
yeah, no, of course. I think that's great. I mean, the keyboard warriors thing is amazing in the same sense though, because there's a ludicrousy to some of them. I had a personal email that was a review that went on for a long time, and when I got near to the end, she said, "Oh, I didn't read all of it." I was like, "Oh." I was like, she's like, she literally read the first few chapters, which if you've seen my writing, a chapter is like 2 pages because I bounce from thing to thing. So eventually I write a little bit and I'm like, chapter, I'll come back. Like, and then, so I was like, she probably read
Wow.
5, 10 pages. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, that's all good. I could take that, you know. But I think it's fantastic the way you're approaching
He's
it. How
only
excited
well,
is your
he's
husband
read
to
the
read it?
first book, but he hasn't read it since I've fixed it because I've had it go through 3 rounds of editing. It's in the final stage of editing now. And another thing that I want to say before I get into this is that if you are an author, do not skimp out on the editing. You have to spend money on your editing. I have spent almost $3,000 just on editing alone. Now you don't have to spend that much, especially if you don't have it. I've saved a lot because I knew I hold myself to extremely high standards, with my work, like with my photography, with my writing. I hold myself to extremely high standards. So I wanted my editor to also do the same. But a lot of people, you need to make sure that you get good
Yeah,
editing. Find someone who is in your genre, who understands your genre, and someone that has been working in the field that has good references to back them up. There's been a lot of people who give their money to editors on Facebook and then they come back and it's not even edited properly, or they just never send them an edited document. So they just take your money and run. Definitely make sure that you get good editing from a reputable source and that they are in your genre. Um, and since I started saying that, I forgot what your question was.
oh god, me too.
I should have written it down.
Do you know what? I'll be honest. I normally have a notepad with me all the time when I'm doing this, so that I can write, because I write questions as I go. Otherwise, I do forget. And
Oh no.
today, I thought I'm gonna freeball it, and I'm like, so like a lot of the time, it's how bad my brain works. Is that I'm trying to pay attention and think of questions, like not think of questions, but I'm like, oh, I really want to ask about that, and then I just keep bouncing. I
Mhm.
don't know how, like the HC Newell, like your name. I had that ready from the get go, but it took me 15 minutes where I was like, you've got to you'll get there. It's this is this. To be fair, if you listen to this podcast, you don't come here for the 100% professional, because
I'm trying.
I can't do that. You come here for the
Oh gosh,
nonsense and
what
to
were
learn
you
from very
asking?
smart
It's gonna
people.
bother me now. What were you asking?
Not
You
me.
said, and I started answering. I said first, and then I went to the editing. So it was something that has to do with editing.
Oh, I was gonna say this is another great thing about this podcast is we. I have to. I'm gonna edit this out. There's just oh, it's bad. I'm gonna
No,
keep your chuckles in, but I'm gonna edit out what I'm saying, and people are gonna be
no.
like, she's what's going on? But the the editing side, I couldn't pay that much, and that's but in my defence, I'm poor. So, no, like no, yeah, no, I do understand. You've got to get that though, because since publishing, we've gone back and refixed it about 16 times just because I kept noticing new things, like where
Edited it.
I edited it. Oh my god, yeah, that's the one. And then I sent it off to an author friend who is amazing, like phenomenal. His writing terrifies me, because he sends me little chapters of stuff. His name's Ian Sputnik. If you're listening, go and find his books. They're terrifying. He sends me these chapters, and he'll be like, "Oh, I just thought of this," and I'm like, "Oh, that's the most poetic, beautiful thing I've ever read. What are you going to do with that?" And he's like, "Ah, I don't know," and then you just move on to the next thing. I'm like, I would put that in every book. I would, like, if I had a third of the talent.
All
But
right, it
yeah,
was something about the
God, I can't remember
reviews,
what the
and
question
then you
was.
asked something, and I don't know if it was, dang, what was it? It had to do with either between the reviews and editing, and I don't know why I got off on that tangent, but I just felt it was important because you can definitely tell when a self-published author edits it themselves.
I don't
My
know. I
reader
really don't.
Keith that
I
I was
don't.
telling you about, he was suggesting for me. Thank you, Keith, for everything,
Thank you, Keith.
for mentioning this podcast to me. Um, but he was suggesting, because I did not want to pay that much for editing, and it's one of the reasons also that I have put off publishing for so long, because it's expensive. It's very, very expensive. So this is in U.S. dollars. I don't know what that would round off to in pounds or anything like that, but in U.S. dollars, it's been about $2,500 to $3,000, and that's total. It was for a developmental edit, a copy edit, and then the proofreading. It's very expensive. Mine was probably more
Yeah.
expensive than most people, but that's because like I said, I went with the best of the best, and I went with reputable sources, and I went with people who have years of experience in fantasy editing. So I paid top dollar for top dollar. You don't have to pay that much, but what I was saying is he was suggesting for me to go with someone new that will be cheaper. And for me, that wouldn't work. And I don't suggest, and not that I don't support new editors, I do. But if you're wanting to see sales results, and if you are wanting to really put yourself out there and try to get as far as you can without having a traditional publisher, you need to use someone who has experience. For my prequel, for example, I'll probably use someone a little newer just because it's not part of the main story. But at least for my first book, I'm going all out and I'm doing as much as I possibly can. And for my second book, I'm going to do the same. And then after that, I'll already have the following that I need, and I'm probably going to have a lot more experience. So maybe by the time my third book is published, I'll be like, whoa, why am I suggesting to do this? But as a new author, this is what I am suggesting. Definitely make sure you get really good editing done. Save up for it. Yeah, save up for it. Don't edit it yourself. Even
Of
if you get
course.
someone new, don't edit it yourself. You have to have a different pair of eyes looking at it. People will be able to tell if you edited it yourself. They will.
Yeah. No, I get that. What's the research that goes into writing fantasy? Did you prepare yourself, like, for the armor, for the weaponry?
I know
Did
more
you do
about
any
sword
research in
fighting
that
and
sense?
bows and arrows than I ever expected to know in my entire life. And like saying it out loud, like just describing it to you now, I probably wouldn't be able to, but when I'm writing, it just comes out. And if I don't, like, I had to know, like, you don't fire, you know, a bow and arrow. You loose a bow and arrow, or I guess maybe you could also shoot it, but I don't even think that's really the right term. The fletchings and the shaft. Like that's so obvious to some people, but I didn't know any of that stuff was called. So I had to look up all that. I had to look up different techniques for sword fighting and different, I guess, verbiage that's used because I didn't know any of it. And there's obviously it's a sword sorcery sort of. That's not the type of fantasy that it is, but it's got a bunch of swords. It's kind of like Game of Thrones era, I guess you could say. um, my book has been compared to the Witcher series. I don't know if anyone has ever watched or read that, which is phenomenally amazing. It's been compared to that by 3 or 4 different readers who don't know each other. So I am on cloud nine with that. I love it. I'm telling everyone. That's what people compare my work to. No.
Have you ever fired a bow? Did you do
Excuse me.
that? That's all right. That's the thing. If when you're doing that, you got to go out. You got to not just go out and fire a bow. You need to find somewhere safe. Like, that's something I've been doing for years. Is archery. I picked it up on holiday, and I saw it for whatever reason in the shop, and I was like, I'm obsessed with Skyrim and the Green Arrow, like the comics I've been reading since I was a kid. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, I'm getting the bow. And yeah, and it's such a strange thing because it's an odd learning curve, and it's not like the films. Like you're never going to round off arrows like Legolas. I mean, don't get me wrong, it looks fantastic, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like I love Lord of the Rings, but there's a skill to it that does take a while, and it's you don't
Yeah,
acquire
there
it,
you go.
you
That's
almost
that's a good
release it.
word, release.
Does that make sense? Yeah, because you pull it back to that point, and
Yeah.
then once you're ready, you just let go, and and then you let it do its thing. No, I can't
Well,
remember
that's
what
an
my
arrow.
original point was.
And
And yeah, the same thing about sword fighting. I don't know where your research was, but one of the biggest things I found, I was looking this up because I have too much time on my hands, is when a lot of people used to sword fight, depending on the sword, it wasn't just
hmm
clanking swords together because that would dull the blade.
right.
So it was more like defensive. But that might
Well,
just be
I didn't look
certain
up
swords.
a lot
I have
of.
no idea.
I looked
I'll
up
be
mostly
honest.
YouTube videos of people teaching how to sword fight and of like movies and just things like that. So I can, because I am not good at battles. I'm
Mm.
not good at writing fight scenes. They have turned out good since I've gotten better and since I have gotten my writing partner because he's really good at fight scenes. And since I had it edited, it's they're much better than they were because they were awful. It was literally they dance around each other and then he falls. That was basically it. It was like four words, four by fight scenes. It was awful. But I have looked up. I've tried to incorporate a lot of elements of because I don't want to put cultures that I'm not a part of in my book. But I try to put elements of other cultures, like the Viking culture, Celtic culture, things like that. I just really love that lifestyle, and I love those cultures, and I try to kind of incorporate a few elements from those, just to add a little bit of depth, in my world and in my characters. I had to look up a lot of magic systems. I had to look up just not only to give myself ideas, but you need to understand fantasy to write it. I mean, you can make up your own stuff, but if you are wanting to reach an audience, they have expectations, and you need to know what those expectations are and then work off of those.
Yeah, and I mean, fight scenes are hard. Fight scenes are incredibly hard. I couldn't imagine what goes into an fantasy fight scene. I mean, my newest book is that I'm working on is about a boxer. She goes through an event, we'll call it, and
For
it's
you?
like a really small personal story. Yeah, so I'm writing about a woman who essentially is readjusting to life after a traumatic event. It's like a really small personal story, but it's something that I was like, I had this idea for, and I was like, I need this, but coming from a boxing background, I've been doing mixed martial arts my whole life. I was like, this should be an like writing the battles or the fights should come easy for me. And I was like, as I was writing them, I'm like, oh my god, this is so hard. Like, I couldn't imagine writing a fantasy battle.
The swords is they are the worst part because it's a lot of repetition, like a lot of the same movements and a lot of the same words are used. So that's where I really struggled. Like he ducked and he spun and he swung and he slashed. And I hate sword fights. I'm just going to be real with everyone. I hate sword fights. um,
No.
in my first book, Mir is the main character, and she has a curse that ties her to the Order of Sorrow, who are the religious faction that I was mentioning earlier, who kind of oversees the human-led territories where she lives because she's human. But anytime she uses her magic, they can find her and they can track her. So she can't use it really in book one. She does, but most of the fights have to be with her sword or with her dagger. And that was just it was so hard for me. I am not a sword fighting type of person. I don't like it. I don't want to watch it. I don't want to write about it. I don't want to think about it. But whenever I write magic fights, it comes so naturally because you can be so creative with that. So I really loved when I would incorporate her magic because there's just this level of excitement that into it that's so much better to me personally than swinging the sword. So it came off much
Yeah.
easier for me to write the magic fighting.
No, of course. So I had to ask you, because of your Normally, when I do a sign out, I say your name and I say, where can people find you? Can the people find you? Or are you?
Yeah, so right now, my website is still under development. As I said, I hold myself to way too high standards, so I keep redoing it, and it's never perfect enough. And I don't want to pay anyone to do it because I've already spent so much. So I don't have a website yet, and I need one. But I do have Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I'm most active on Facebook and Instagram because I don't understand Twitter. I just made it 3 days ago, and I don't get it. But yeah, you can just search. It's just Facebook or Instagram.com/HC Newell, Newell, which is my pen name, and that's where you can find me. I will, post little trailers that kind of give a little bit more information on the Order of Sorrow, the Broken Order Brotherhood, on some of the characters. So I already have all of these trailers that I made. They're really quick. They're like 30 to 60 seconds long, just to kind of give you guys a little more information on the story before you read it. I've drew a map for my world. I have it available on my Facebook page. It will be on my website also for download, for free download, and it'll of course be in the printed edition of the book in an ebook. And then I'm also adding a translation guide because there are different languages in the book. Um, so I will have translations for some of the recurring words that you would kind of need to know and how to pronounce them. So it's a little bit easier. One of the characters' names, and this is actually a name from Witcher book, which kind of unfortunate, especially since people say that my book reminds them of The Witcher. But his name is Avalok, and it's one of my favorite names in the entire world, so I just had to use it. But people aren't going to know how to pronounce that when they read it. So I have a whole guide on how to pronounce names and things like that. And that is also on my Facebook. It will be on my website for free download as well.
Nice one. And what I'll do as well is I will always drop the links in the description below where you can find me on Twitter at Mr. King Reardon. And no, I had to just plug that there. I love the idea of that because I did it watching the Spartacus series. It's one of my favourites of all time, and there's a name in that which is Sura, which is Sura, and I just loved it so much that I'm waiting for my opportunity to use it because I was like, I love that name. I think that's amazing,
Yeah,
but I've never heard it before. It sounds really strange. I was like, but I need to put that in
that is a
something.
really nice name.
But yeah, I was like, I'm gonna use it. I'm gonna find a space or somewhere where I'm like, well, there's loads of names in there, and in like various things where I hear, and I've got a notepad of pages of names where it sounds really strange, but I kept hearing stuff. I was working at a place, and we had like there was like it was like a call center, so it was just call, 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 and I was just taking names. So I'm like, I love that. I'm just going to use that. It's really odd. I was like, right, I'm rambling, and we have to wrap it up. So I want to say, HC Neil, I want to say thank you so much for coming on, and I really hope I get a chance to talk to you again
Yeah,
soon.
thank you so much. And my book will be releasing hopefully in April if everything goes well and gets approved, maybe on my birthday, April 16th. So just make sure that you guys follow the Instagram and Facebook. I'll have more information about my website and my email list, which will also have my official release date once it is approved and ready to go.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I shall talk
Yeah,
to you
thank you
soon.
so much for having me.
Goodbye.
Have a good one.